things in reflection of this.
The Manson family was a commune established in California in the late 1960s, led by the notorious Charles Manson. They gained national notoriety after the murder of actress Sharon Tate and 4 others on August 9, 1969 by Tex Watson and 3 other members of the family acting under the instructions of Charles Manson. One of Manson's most popular quotes is, "The mind is endless. You put me in a dark solitary cell, and to you that's the end, to me it's the beginning. It's a universe in there, there's a world in there, and I'm free." Living mostly by begging, he soon got to know Mary Brenner, a 23-year-old graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Brenner was working as a library assistant at the University of California, Berkeley, and Manson moved in with her. According to a second-hand account, he overcame her resistance to his bringing other women in to live with them. Before long, they were sharing Brenner's residence with 18 other women. Manson taught his followers that they were the reincarnation of the original Christians, and that the Romans were the establishment. He strongly implied that he was Christ. He often told the story envisioning himself on the cross with the nails in his feet and hands. Sometime around 1967, he began using the alias Charles Willis Manson. He often said it very slowly, "Charles is Willis Man's son," implying that his will was the same as that of the Son of Man. For some time, Manson had been saying that racial tension between blacks and whites was growing and that blacks would soon rise up in rebellion in America's city. He had emphasized Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, which had taken place on April 4, 1968. On a bitterly cold New Year's Eve at Myers Ranch, the family members gathered outside around a large fire, listening as Manson explained that the social turmoil he had been predicting had also been predicted by the Beatles. The White Album songs, he declared, told it all, although in code. In fact, he maintained or would soon maintain, the album was directed at the family, an elect group that was being instructed to preserve the worthy from the impending disaster. In early January 1969, the family escaped the desert's cold and positioned itself to monitor LA's supposed tensions by moving to a canary yellow home in Canoga Park, not far from the Spahn Ranch. Because this locale would allow the group to remain submerged beneath the awareness of the outside world, Manson called it the Yellow Submarine, another Beatles reference. There, family members prepared for the impending apocalypse, which around a campfire Manson had termed Helter Skelter, after the song of that name. By February, Manson's vision was complete. The family would create an album whose songs, as subtle as those of the Beatles, would trigger the predicted chaos. Ghastly murders of whites by blacks would be met with retaliation, and a split between racist and non-racist whites would yield white self-annihilation. Blacks' triumph, as it were, would merely precede their being ruled by the family, which would ride out the conflict in the bottomless pit, a secret city beneath Death Valley, at the Canoga Park house, while family members worked on vehicles and pored over maps to prepare for their desert escape. They also worked on songs for their world-changing album. When they were told Terry Melcher was to come to the house to hear the material, the women prepared a meal and cleaned the place, but Melcher never arrived. Ironically, Manson and his family were arrested not on suspicion of the Tate LaBianca murders, but simply on the belief that they had vandalized a portion of the Death Valley National Park while they were hiding out in the Mojave Desert. In 1969, the county sheriff had taken them into custody, not realizing that they were involved in the heinous murders. But it was through the confession of Susan Atkins, while held in detention on suspicion of murdering Gary Hinman during an unrelated incident, that led detectives to realize that Manson and his followers were involved in the killings. Manson became impatient after his race war failed to materialize. He told his followers that they needed to give the war a kick to do what Blackie didn't have the energy or the smarts to do, ignite Helter Skelter and bring in Charlie's Kingdom. According to Tex Watson, one of Manson's followers, Manson directed his family members to kill everyone at the home on 10,050 Cielo home. 4 of them broke into the home and murdered pregnant actress Sharon Tate, as well as 4 other people. Manson and the others connected to the killing were arrested several months later, and the trial began less than a year later in the summer of 1970. Manson was convicted and was imprisoned for the rest of his life. Some interesting insights into Manson's philosophy came from the many interviews he did.
And I say I hate you first. You're the first line in my hate. I hate all white people. White people are rotten, and black people are just like them. Because you've made them just exactly like you. They walk like you, they talk like you, everything they do is like you. They want to be you so much. They love your woman more than you do. They know your mind better than you. They wear your clothes. They've even learned to wear your shoes. You take them out of the jungle, and you want to make them into a man. Why couldn't they be left to be God? Why do you want to make them into a man? In the jungle, they were God. Africans are smart, aren't they? Over here, everybody thinks them old black people are just dumb old colored folks. But they're not dumb old colored folks. They're very smart. They're very aware. And their capacity for fear is 3 times what yours is.
Most of the so-called benefits of the cult were self-preservation if his apocalypse happened, which it did not. After the arrests and convictions of family members, the cult was disbanded and all of the members who were not convicted renounced their ways.
I live where there's no TV, there's no radio, there's no clocks, there's no electric lights. The girls carry water. They don't wear makeup. They have their babies by themselves. They go in the shack and squat down and have their babies. I live on the ground. I live on the earth. I lived in Hollywood, and I had all that, the Rolls Royce and the Ferrari and the pad in Beverly Hills. I had the surfboard and the Beach Boys and the Beaskies and the Neil Diamond and the Rob Scott and the Jimmy Schiffrin and Elvis Presley's, Mesca Bestleys and all them guys. The Dina Martins and the Nancy Sinatras and the Gaffer Safran. Will you do it to me? I hear you did good, honey, and all that kind of, will you come up to my house later? So I went through all that, and I seen that was a bigger prison than the one I just got out of, and I really didn't care to go back to prison. See, prison doesn't begin and end at the gate. Prison is in the mind. It's locked in one world that's dead and dying, or it's open to a world that's free and alive. Drugs, LSD, I don't consider a drug. I don't consider peyote a drug. Those are more or less religiously significant awareness, mind-expanding apparatuses that come from the intelligence of the universe.